Turo's made some major changes in the last week regarding their pricing, and we've got to talk about it. Last week, my phone started blowing up with Facebook notifications, emails, and text messages about a change Turo made surrounding dynamic pricing. And while this isn't a change that Turo has announced publicly in the sense that they haven't put out a blog post or an email about it, it is something that has affected enough hosts where all of us are talking to one another and many people know about what's going on, and I feel as though I have gathered enough info to make a video about it. Last week, hosts throughout a few different markets were hit with a surprise when they were no longer able to edit their pricing in a way that significantly varied with Turo's set dynamic pricing. Basically, when someone sets their pricing too high from dynamic, they are then met with this error, which basically blocks them from doing it. And based on what I've gathered, this is affecting hosts in Phoenix, Austin, and Las Vegas, though there may be a couple of other markets throughout the country. These are the three that the majority of people are talking about. Then a day or so later, someone posted this in the Turo Facebook groups, giving some more context into the change. I'll put it here on screen, removing any identifying information. And I'm going to read it out because it is quite small. Hi host, we're making an update to pricing for trips booked more than 14 days in advance in the Las Vegas market. What this means for you. Because one or more of your vehicles are eligible, you may notice a change when setting custom prices for these future trips. Any custom prices you've already set will stay as they are. If you edit prices more than 14 days in advance, you won't be able to set prices as far above dynamic pricing recommendations as before. Why we're making this change. Dynamic pricing recommendations are designed to help you find the right balance between price and booking likelihood based on your vehicle's make, model, year, trip timing, and local market demand. Advanced bookings can offer hosts more predictable business and are generally associated with fewer incidents. Guest booking further in advance also typically have more vehicles to compare, making price an even bigger factor for their decision. Past booking data shows that for some of your vehicles, prices set well above dynamic pricing recommendations tend to result in lower utilization. This update is intended to help your vehicle stay competitive and improve your chances of getting booked farther in advance. We're continuously improving our pricing models based on booking trends and market data, so recommendations may change over time to better reflect what guests are booking in your market. If a recommendation doesn't seem right for your specific vehicle, fill out this form and we can help review your pricing. So in short, Turo is now going to take control of our pricing, which is something that many hosts, including myself, thought would be coming sooner than later. And while this is only affecting certain markets throughout the country, this is no doubt Turo's way of getting their foot into the door of this policy, testing it out, and I would guess they're going to be implementing this throughout the entire country sooner than later. So what does this change mean, and why do Turo hosts care about it, and more specifically, why are people so upset? Now, the crux of the issue here is that Turo is dictating pricing off of dynamic pricing, and the bottom line is dynamic pricing just isn't very good. Dynamic pricing is Turo's in-house tool to set pricing based off of a number of factors, as I just mentioned. And the reality is their dynamic pricing tends to price cheap cars too high, sometimes pricing my 2015 Elantra higher than a Mercedes of the same year, but it also tends to price nicer cars too low, with cars that are valued at $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 or higher at $40 to $60 per day. And obviously, depending on the type of car that we're talking about and how much somebody purchased a car for, this just doesn't make sense. Especially given the fact if you have a car that has historically rented well or rented good enough for you for $100 per day, why would you discount that down to $60 per day if you don't need to? But beyond just the optics of discounting a price unnecessarily, this is a business model that could potentially be unsustainable for many hosts throughout the country. Most expensive cars, they rent for premium prices in order to make renting it worth it. Not only to offset the cost of the car, but the depreciation, and of course, whoever owns that car also wants to make money too. If we have something like an $80,000 SUV renting for $60 per day, this is an unsustainable business model, and you pour a ton of fuel on the fire whenever you take into account discounts, which Turo also requires. Now, obviously, people with nicer and more expensive cars are very upset by this because one, they're making less money. Two, they maybe have a car or are looking to purchase a car with the historical data of what that car could and should rent for, and now the data is going to be thrown out the window because Turo is going to dictate it for us. But three, it's just another rule that Turo is putting onto their hosts, which is off-putting for many. Now, on a personal level, this change isn't going to affect my fleet that much for a couple of different reasons. Number one is I'm not in this test market, so I'm not actually affected by this change at all yet, though I am sure it will come to Dallas sooner than later because it seems like Dallas is always a market that gets these changes first. But two, I have mostly cheap economical vehicles. So whenever it comes to dynamic pricing, the issue I run into more often than not is that Turo prices it way too high. And though I will definitely be impacted with this with some of my nicer cars, like like my Lincoln Navigator or some of my Mercedes, this isn't something that's going to be a fleet-wide problem for me. But despite the fact that me personally, I won't be super affected by this change, it doesn't mean that I am not also frustrated by this, and I don't see it as a massive overstep. And I think that hosts have a right to be deeply frustrated by this. Turo hosts throughout the country know that Turo has been making some massive changes lately. And whenever Turo announces a change, I always try to view that change through the lens of Turo. And doing this oftentimes offers me some clarity in why a change was made and how even if I don't agree with a specific change, I can see their perspective with it. The reality is over the last year or so, probably even longer, most of Turo's changes have been made to serve two functions. The first is to cater to the lowest denominator hosts. So the hosts that are ultimately not great, they're not doing a good job, they're breaking the rules, Turo has to create safeguards for these hosts to protect themselves and to protect the platform, and I get that. The other objective has been to just reduce the bleeding of money. The reality is, at least my theory has been, Turo is losing a lot of money on claims, they have been for a long time, and so Turo is trying to stop the bleeding of that. They're trying to find a path to profitability. And I believe that they have identified this as guests who rent for long periods of time with far advanced notice, which is why they are pushing this business model onto us ad nauseum. But I guess my frustrations with this change are twofold. First is the fact that many of these policies that Turo is making are stacking on top of one another. And so whenever you look at these policy changes individually, they may not seem that bad, but whenever you stack them onto other policies, they become quite harmful to business operations. For example, we take this dynamic pricing, maybe in and of itself, we could figure out a way to spin this to make it a positive thing. I'm not saying that it is, and I'm not saying I'm going to spin it, but maybe there's a world where we could. However, whenever we take this dynamic pricing and we stack it with required discounts, this $60 per day for a luxury vehicle quickly becomes $45 per day. Or through a different angle, Turo is oftentimes contradicting themselves with their own policy. For example, for the last couple of months, Turo has really been advertising the fact that if you have a trip that is booked far out in advance, you will earn more from that trip via a higher earning split. But is that really the case if Turo is having to lower our prices significantly in order to achieve that advance notice trip? Previously, if you had a trip that was booked 28 days in advance, you could earn potentially 100% of that daily rate of the trip. So for easy numbers, if you have a car that was booked for $100 per day and you're on the 90% plan, instead of earning $90 on that trip, you could earn $100. Well, now Turo is going to reduce the price of that car from $100 per day to $60 per day. So instead of being able to make up to $100 per day, you're only able to make up to $60. It's a net loss for the host. So the policies that Turo is making are just really contradicting one another, and it makes it really unattractive. And to be honest, I don't know if Turo just doesn't think about this, if they don't think we're going to think about it, or if they just don't care. But it's an issue, and I think it's disrespectful to the hosts who make their platform great. But beyond that, I have a lot of issues with this policy because it is my philosophy that Turo, or any marketplace for that matter, shouldn't control the pricing of the asset that's being listed. These platforms are not buying the asset, they shouldn't dictate the pricing of them. And whenever we look at marketplaces historically, this has been the case. If you rent on Airbnb, Vrbo, or Booking.com, you can price your house whatever you would like. That house may not get rented, and Airbnb or Vrbo may tell you, hey, your pricing's really high, you may want to look at that. But they are never going to force you to lower it. Same with Outdoorsy, RVshare, or Arvezi. You can rent your RV for whatever price you would like, and while it may not get rented if the price is too high, you can list it for the price. And if it gets booked, great, and if it doesn't, well, it's probably because your pricing is too high. Even if we go into adjacent industries like eBay or Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, you can list your items for whatever price you would like. The point I'm trying to make is that I feel like Turo has been overstepping a bit, and I think when it comes to certain lines that shouldn't be crossed, pricing is one of them. It is the responsibility of the marketplace to give the correct data to the operator and to the host so that they can make an educated decision on what they want to do. But ultimately, the discretion of what is done should be held to the host and the host alone. Because again, I go back to if someone doesn't rent a car because that car is priced too high, and if it does get rented at a high price, then I would argue that price was never too high, and that is a win for everyone that car was rented at a premium. Now again, it is basically indisputable at this point that Turo is doing this in order to facilitate and incentivize more bookings with a higher advance notice, so 14 to 28 or more days. But I just ultimately don't think that this is the way to go about doing it, and I would challenge this thinking altogether. If we have found that historically, advance notice bookings do very, very well from a damage and incidental perspective and a risk perspective, if we lower that price of that car to achieve the same thing, higher advance notice bookings. Are you really achieving the same type of guest? Because one is paying a premium of 40 to 50%, the other is paying a discount. And I would argue that this attracts two completely segments of renters, one being significantly more risky than the other, despite the fact that they have the same advance notice. And it just feels like flawed thinking here. Now, ultimately, this is kind of all I have to say on this matter right now because we don't have all of the information. As I stated earlier, Turo hasn't made a full-fledged announcement on this, and I really wish that they would. However, until they do, I'll just be keeping tabs on what hosts are saying, and I'll definitely be reporting back. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.